Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you're all having a good day. In today's episode, we're going to return to the end for another episode in this sort of trilogy of Bedrock-related shenanigans. Not Bedrock Edition, of course, but Bedrock the Block, because we are going to be defying Bedrock in yet another way after having gotten onto the nether roof and started to destroy Bedrock in the previous two episodes. We are going to spend an episode talking about how you can manipulate the gateways that take you to the outer islands of the end to spawn in other places that could potentially be beneficial to players who want a little bit more out of the end dimension. Now I'm going to sleep here just to make sure I've set my spawn here in the overworld because we're going to need to come back here shortly. And I've already been gathering a few of the tools we will need to bring with us, like these azalea leaves. We're going to be building with those out in the end void to try and spawn a custom location for a gateway. I'm also going to see if I have some cherry leaves with me. I might actually just quickly farm up a cherry tree to grab some leaves so that I can use those to mark specific blocks out there. I actually quite like having a central cherry tree here. Maybe we'll build another custom one in the center of this area. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The other thing we will need to take to the end is some fresh end crystals, for which we of course need 4 ghast tears. Well, we need 1 ghast tear per crystal, but we will need 4 crystals. We also need to make ourselves some eyes of ender. We will need 4 of them as well, so we'll need a couple of blaze powder for that. There we go, 4 eyes of ender, and then we'll just need some glass. Because we are going to be respawning the ender dragon at least once in order to generate a fresh end gateway, and from there we're going to see what we can do about getting it to generate in a different location. Because as we return to the end here, I think I can confirm, if I remember correctly, that we have only fought the ender dragon twice in this world. We have generated 2 of these end gateways as a result, and these are these bedrock structures with a central gateway block that allow you to travel to the outer end islands. I've definitely been through that one there, that's what the scaffolding is there for, but I think I've also either thrown an ender pearl through or flown through that one with fireworks. So both of those already have a corresponding gateway out on the outer ring of islands beyond this central island of the end. And these lead us back to the central end island if we travel through them. Now, there are many other end gateways that spawn in various places outside the reach of this ring next to the outer islands, but those always teleport you back to the obsidian platform at the center of the end, whereas if I fly through this one specifically, that one takes me back through this gateway to the central island, although it took a couple of tries because my flying was not all that accurate. Now, each time you kill the ender dragon in a world, it will generate one of these gateways in a ring around the central island until it reaches the maximum number of 20 gateways. So when you hear people talking about killing the ender dragon 20 times, that is just to create more of these gateways. You can continue to fight the ender dragon after that, but it simply won't generate any fresh gateways to the islands. But my point is, we've only generated 2 gateways. There are 18 more that we could potentially generate, and so we're going to do that with a fresh one. I'm going to take down this Wither Rose farm, which tragically does not work in vanilla Minecraft anymore. I'm going to make sure I have a few extra firework rockets on my hotbar, and we're going to place the 4 end crystals around the bedrock portal to resummon the dragon. The most important thing to remember is that once we have fought the dragon, a new end gateway will appear, and we are not going to go through it right away. But it's been a while since I fought the ender dragon in this world, so this is going to be a fun way to get some exercise, stretch my legs, blow off some steam, and fight a boss for a change. Alright, let's go. End crystals first. You know the drill at this point. I'm not going to explain too much of the fight to you. You've seen it before. We're just one shot away from taking out the dragon, and that'll do it. It'll come to the central portal, and that'll be our 3rd end gateway generated. Now we need to keep an eye out for where that generates once the fog lifts from the dragon's arena. We're no longer getting absolutely tons of XP from fighting the dragon, so we'll gather up a little bit of that here, but I just need to mend my sword and my axe a little bit. We got a couple of free ender pearls out of that fight as well, not too shabby. Now, where is our 3rd gateway? Oh, I think it's this one. Yeah, we had that one over there with the scaffolding. We had this one here, and finally we have another one right here. Now, I'm going to alight on the top of the portal. I'm going to not fly through the central section of it or throw an ender pearl through for the moment, and I'm going to take the coordinates of that. We're going to turn off the chunk borders for a second. That is -30, 91. Now, a cool thing to know about end gateways is that now this has generated, it has not generated the return gateway that exists out there in the outer islands. It will only generate that the first time you travel through it. It's kind of similar to the way nether portals work, where the first time you travel through a portal to the nether, it creates a portal for you on the other side, but that portal does not exist before that. So to activate this and generate the outer gateway, we're going to have to travel through this. But before we do that, we're going to trick this end gateway into thinking that the outer ring of end islands starts much closer to the central island than it actually does. And that's why I've brought all of these leaves with me, including some cherry leaves, and we're going to need a couple of extra blocks of endstone. I'm just going to bring enough for us to make something like a 5x5 platform, just to be sure. Yeah, that'll do. Something along those lines. Now, I'm going to use one of the other portals here to get out to the area where we would expect that end gateway to spawn. And while I'm traveling, I'm going to show you a really helpful tool that's going to show us a bit more about how these end gateways generate. So this is the Return End Gateway Generation tool. This was sent to me by ncolyer, who made it a long time ago now. I think several years ago, around the time I was messing around with this stuff in a previous season of the Minecraft Survival Guide. And as the sidebar says, this is a tool that you can use to determine what chunks the game will check to determine where it'll generate a return gateway. Now, if you look at these three rings here, in the center of this orange ring is 20 different dots, and these each represent the spawn locations of each of the end gateways that ring the central end island. Obviously, this map doesn't show you anything about the geography of the end because the landscape is going to generate differently depending on your world seed, but these 20 gateways will always generate in the same places. Your world seed also determines which order they generate, so if you wanted to do this with every single end gateway, you would probably want to generate a copy of your world seed before you even go and fight the Ender Dragon for the first time, and that way you could determine where the first end gateway was going to generate. Create a couple of things out in the void before you did the Ender Dragon fight, which would take a lot of bridging because you don't have a light tray yet, but you could do it. And then that would allow you to make sure that if the gateway that was, let's say, all the way this way was going to be the first one to generate, then you have all of the information to check all of the chunks that are potentially going to generate that end gateway and spawn the return gateway basically anywhere you wanted it. So to understand what's going on here, we have to understand a little bit more about how the game checks for valid locations for these return end gateways to generate. And we're going to flip this around so that this one is the one we use as our example. Although I think we'll actually find that that one there, that's the, negative 3091, that's the end gateway we were just looking at. So we'll actually be using a lot of these numbers to determine where we're going to place certain things in a second, but it's a lot simpler if we take one of the examples that's along the cardinal directions. It's also worth noting that positive and negative axes are going to be a little bit weird here because the up-down axis, you would think of up on a map typically as north, but these numbers are going towards positive values on the Z axis in game, which is actually south. So this might have the potential to get you a little bit turned around, but trust the numbers and ignore any directions that are to do with north, south, east, or west as far as this tool is concerned, because you'll only get confused otherwise. So when the game looks for a valid location for one of these return end gateways, it casts a line out from 0 about 1,024 blocks. You'll see that this green ring basically ends at the 1,024 mark. And in each of these chunks here, it's looking for an area where the game has naturally generated endstone as part of the outer ring of end islands. So it'll check all the way to the maximum range, that 1,024 block mark, and ideally it's going to find endstone somewhere within this chunk here. If it does that, it's actually going to check back one chunk closer to the central end island, because the game doesn't want to spawn one of these gateways in the middle of a big landmass in the outer islands. It wants to spawn it along the edge of the island, so it really feels like you can explore outwards from that ring that the void forms between the central island and the outer islands. So assuming it finds any blocks in this outer chunk, it's also going to check one chunk back from that and see if it finds any blocks at all above the height of about Y15, and if it finds those blocks, it's going to check another chunk back and another chunk back and so on and so forth until it reaches the minimum range at which the game will generate an end gateway, which is right down here in this last chunk, but right on the edge of this last chunk. So -7 because there's a slight deviation from center here, 767. So roughly that is the amount of blocks out from the center where the game will look for a valid position to spawn an end gateway. And if you have left blocks in each of these chunks, it's going to search for endstone as close to the central end island as possible. If it doesn't find any endstone, it doesn't think of that as a valid place to spawn an end gateway, because they don't want to spawn end gateways in the middle of stuff that players have already built out in the void of the end. And so it's going to search back along here for any of these chunks that contain endstone, and it's going to place the end gateway next to any endstone it finds. Now, if it doesn't find any solid blocks anywhere in this range of chunks, that's when it will cast another ray that will go out even further until it finds the endstone that is part of that outer ring of islands. But what we want to do is place blocks all the way along this line in each of these chunks to trick the game into thinking terrain starts sooner than it does. And in the very last position where we could possibly place any blocks whatsoever, we're going to place some endstone. And that's going to trick the game into thinking that the outer end islands actually start there, and it's going to spawn the end gateway at that approximate location. Although that is not the end gateway we're working with, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to scroll all the way back down here. We're going to move this one around the clock slightly here to -30, 91. And we're going to look at the line this casts out from 0, because this is on a pretty severe diagonal, which means we're going to have to pay attention to which of these chunks we are placing the blocks in. It's actually going to be really useful to use these black dots that you can find along this line, because those are going to give you the precise coordinates of certain blocks along this line where the game will try and spawn an end gateway around. We just need to make sure that these blocks exist at these coordinates. You can ignore anything that's after the decimal point, really. We just want to make sure that things that are over a chunk border are where they say they are. And this last dot down here, the one that's at -240, 729, that's going to be more or less the last place that we could generate this end gateway that's close to the central end island. I'm going to take a screenshot that includes all of these coordinates, because those are the coordinates at which we are going to be placing the cherry leaves, just to make sure that we've got all of them where we want them. But the idea is we're going to draw a line, or close enough to this line, using leaf blocks so that they won't spawn any endermen because they're transparent blocks, and at the very end of this line, as close as we possibly can get to the central end island, we're going to build a little area of endstone, and the game is going to try and generate the end gateway there when we travel through it from the central island. Hopefully that's making sense so far. Let's get back into Minecraft, and we're going to give this a try. Okay, so coming into land here on this island, we can also witness the end flashes for the first time in this series, because I don't think we've done a video from the end since those were implemented. They are little lights that will appear in the sky, actually quite big lights, but they effectively light up the dimension very briefly as though they are storms happening off in the distance. And this is part of the game starting to prepare to bring vibrant visuals to Java Edition. It's in Bedrock Edition already, of course, and some people have been really enjoying taking advantage of that, but yeah, you will see those appearing in the distance. They will flood the dimension with this kind of purple light, and then the light will fade back down into the usual neutral kind of greeny yellow color. And obviously you can adjust that slightly with torch lighting, but there's a lot of different lighting colors at work in the end now, which is kind of interesting to me. Anyway, where we are standing right now is relatively close to the coordinates we need to be on, because we need to start at -320, and we're aiming for positive 972 on the Z-axis to place our first block. So we're going to start by bridging out from this island here. We can do this at more or less any height. It really depends where you want your custom end gateway position to be. I'm going to keep mine roughly level with this island so we can just bridge out from here without any further complications. Although a couple of blocks further down into the void might be kind of fun. Let's use Y50 just as a nice round number. So to start with, holding down shift like my life depends on it, we're just going to bridge out so that we can hit that 972 coordinate on the Z-axis, staying at -320 as we go. Okay, right here, this says X -320, Z 972, although it doesn't say that in the targeted block data, and this is also where I'm going to turn on these chunk borders. Right here, we are next to the border of a chunk, and so I want to make sure that we are in the right chunk for Minecraft to detect where we want to place these blocks. So I want to make sure that we have blocks in the chunk Minecraft is going to check for a valid end portal location. I'm going to put a block here, and I'm going to put another one over the border into the neighboring chunk just to be sure. Now, our next destination block is -315, 957. So I'm going to determine using the coordinates which direction that is. And it seems like we're decreasing our x-axis by 5 blocks and our z-axis by 15 blocks. So we can kind of turn that into a pattern of going along 3 blocks, coming out by 1 and going along another 3 blocks. And then we should end up, there we go, at -315, 957. We're going to place another cherry leaf right here just to make sure that we have marked that point along our line. We shouldn't need to worry too much about placing another cherry leaf next to it since this is in the middle of a chunk. And we're going to continue along the same line, following this same pattern. Out 1, along 3, out 1, along 3, out 1, along 3, and then we should get to our next coordinate, which is -310, 942. So I'm going to continue doing this, make sure I have the cherry leaves at each of the relevant coordinates. And the next one is right there at -305, 926. I'm going to continue on this pattern until we have all of the blocks in place. We're aiming for the last one to be placed at -240, 729. Okay, and at long last, we have completed our line out from that island. And it's a diagonal. It's a kind of awful looking diagonal because of the pattern that we've had to do here. And of course, these cherry leaf blocks don't really look all that evenly spaced. But if I take a look at this from the air here, you can see that that is a pretty distinct diagonal line leading out towards where the end gateway would normally generate, probably somewhere on this section of the island right there. And with the chunk borders enabled, you can see that each of these cherry leaves is inside the chunk where the coordinate dot is on the graph that we were looking at earlier. And anytime any of them is in doubt, anytime they might cross over a boundary like this one, I've made sure to place a block on each side. Although there are blocks in each chunk anyway, these are basically the essential blocks, the ones we need to make sure are there. Now this last one here is at the final coordinate in that row. That's -240, 729. We're going to build a platform of end stone that straddles the border between these two chunks. We're going to create a nice area here. We're probably going to incorporate the leaves into that, and I'll make sure to light this platform up so we don't get any Enderman spawns on it, just by popping a torch down on any solid block there. This should now be a platform where that end gateway is going to see a bunch of end stone with a bunch of blocks leading up to this chunk and think, okay, that must be where the outer end islands start. I'm going to generate the end gateway somewhere around here. It doesn't have to be exactly here, and typically they like to generate them in the air, so I'm going to keep my wits about me when I go through the portal, just in case it decides to place me in an invalid position and I might end up falling into the void. But now all I have to do is find my way back to the central end island, and we're going to fly through that gateway for the first time. You'll see, of course, that there is not a corresponding end gateway here yet, but once again, we're going to try and find one that's part of these outer end islands here. Failing that, of course, we could return to any of the outer gateways that I've already generated. There are 2 of them further around the circle of islands, and that should take us back to the corresponding gateway on the end island. But if we find one that is not linked out here, that should take us back to the obsidian platform that you spawn in when you first enter the end. Like this one here, for example. And the telltale sign that one of these has been generated naturally is that they are slightly lower down. They typically end up a little bit lower to the ground, and they're also in the center of this landmass instead of being on the edges of one of the islands. So let's throw an ender pearl back through this one. That should take us back to the central platform. Perfect, it has. I'm going to briefly grab some wood out of my utility box so that I can grab some scaffolding and make a couple of trapdoors. That should allow us to get through this end gateway without throwing an ender pearl. Because if we throw an ender pearl and it decides to go through the portal and out the other side, there is nothing for it to land on out there in the void. But if we do this by scaffolding up and simply use trapdoors to crawl into this end gateway space, it's going to land us a little bit more gently on the other side. So I think we'll take advantage of that. We'll pop a trapdoor right there, a trapdoor there. We'll open that one and use it to force us into a crawling position. And then when we step on through this gateway, there we go, we've landed, a little bit further away from our platform of end stone, but the gateway has generated here in the void. Take a look at that. We are miles away from that end island, and if we wanted to, this would be a really great location for an Enderman farm that was separate from the central island, which we're so far away from at this point we can't even see, but that's realistically only about 700 blocks away. Actually slightly less with the diameter of the island itself, but that gateway has spawned for us in a completely separate location where we can build some custom terrain around it. If you wanted to build a void ship, if you wanted to build some kind of spaceship out here in the vacuum of the end, and it felt like a really good place to set up up like a sci-fi base, or even do some other bits and pieces, like you can do map art out here since there is so much space that you'll rarely actually see, so it won't break your immersion as though you were traveling through the overworld, looking down and seeing like a giant picture drawn on the ground. But that is a first for me as well. That is my first time traveling through one of these end gateways that I tried to construct the platform here on a diagonal. So that at least proves that the maths is worth doing. And if drawing a diagonal line like this is a little bit much for you, you might simply want to load up your world seed in creative, kill the Ender Dragon a few times using commands, and then try and figure out which order in the sequence one of the gateways that spawns on the cardinal directions appears. So if you want to do the north, south, east, or west ones, you'll find it a lot easier to bridge out here, just simply building a 2x2 bridge centered on the boundary between two chunks, like along one of these lines. I've done that myself in the past. I find it a lot easier to visualize how all of this is going to work out compared to drawing this diagonal line and having to make sure you hit certain coordinates. But I believe it actually dropped us off somewhere around here. I think this was roughly the coordinates that we landed at. So once again, I'm going to build a little platform of solid blocks here, and we're going to make sure it's well lit up so that we don't end up spawning any Endermen over on this side. And of course, at this point, now we know how to break Bedrock, we could even design something custom around the end portal itself. Like, we could remove the rest of this bedrock and completely redesign the end gateway so it looked very different from how it currently does, which I feel like would be a kind of a fun project, and would also allow us to simply walk into the end gateway there instead of having to fly through it, crawl through it, or throw an ender pearl. So while we're in the mood to mess with Bedrock, how about we give that a go? Now, of course, if we want to do the same bedrock breaking method, we are going to have to build a beacon out here in the void of the end, and so I've set up a wooden platform, primarily because if you try and break wood with a pickaxe, it's going to take a little bit longer, and it'll be a bit more obvious that we are breaking something that we shouldn't be breaking. And I made sure to give us at least a 1 block wide path around the outside so that hopefully we shouldn't lose the beacon or any of these iron blocks to the void, because even though I have an iron farm, at this point, losing stuff to the void still feels kind of inconvenient. We need to set up this beacon with the haste 2 effect, as we have before, and then I need to build another wooden platform on which we can build the bedrock breaking engine. We'll set up the same bedrock breaking contraption as we've used previously, but it looks like I need to go and get some more supplies from the overworld. Okay, I think this is about ready to turn on. Yep, that's looking good. Need to make sure that I can step out of this without it punching me into the void. But the cool part about this is that we can do the same bedrock breaking method inverted from where it was before. All we need to do is place the piston facing downwards on this block. We can put that in our offhand, and we should be able to press left and right click at the same time. We get the same piston with a missing head, and once we do a block update, we've erased that bottom block of bedrock. And I will freely admit that I am still kind of fascinated that this still works the way it does, but it does. And there we go, we're now looking up through the bottom of bedrock into the texture of an end portal, and that's slightly disorienting. So far I have lost a couple of pistons to the void, unfortunately, but there we go. We have completely revealed the block at the center of the end gateway, and we could just hop into this right now if we wanted to, and it would take us back to the central island. But I want to break the bedrock on the top part as well. I think I might have just sent one of those pistons back through the portal as well. Gotta find a bunch of junk waiting for me on the other side. And this right here should be the last piece of bedrock we're going to break. Bam! There we go. Okay, now, if we remove all of this, we have one completely exposed piece of end gateway portal. And it kind of looks like a gameplay glitch, just the parallax effect there is a little bit mind-blowing, sitting there on its own. And now that we've destroyed the bedrock breaking engine and we get our peace and quiet back, we can think about what blocks we want to use to decorate this portal purely on an aesthetic level. No more bedrock, it's going to be our own design from here on out. So I've come up with a funky little design for this, tested it out in a creative world, liked what I saw, and now I've brought all the materials with me and I'm building it in survival. But it occurred to me, I'm going to make this fairly compact. I think I'm going to make it like, you know, something that I have to fly into still, kind of a similar design to the end gateways that we already have, but maybe with a little bit more, like, you know, aesthetic flourish. But one of the things you could do with a gateway that is completely removed from its bedrock housing is fly entities through here if you wanted to. I mean, you could have a minecart rail that would go through, and that could basically bring anything that would be transportable in a minecart. But if you wanted to, you could fly a Happy Ghast into one of these things and have it zip across the void from the end island to here or back again. And that could be really useful if you're planning on transporting entities out into the further reaches of the end. So that is a trick I will keep in my back pocket and maybe use in a future video where I might want to make a village out here in the end. end. But to begin with, I'm going to part with my love of scaffolding, and I'm actually going to pillar up here using regular blocks, mostly because I don't want to fall through the scaffolding, but here we go. We can place a couple of blocks on and around the portal like so, which should give us the opportunity to put a slab above it like that, and we'll add a slab below it later too. I'm going to have this kind of housing around the outside, and I thought what better thing to do this with than purple blocks. We're going to have purple stairs supported by this crimson strip log, because the crimson strip log is going to stick out of the top here as well. Then down below each of these purple stairs, we're going to have them kind of stretch out like a little housing for the portal like that. Then stepping back up on top of here, we're going to have a stripped mangrove log. We're going to have these wings that stretch out to east and west, because south of us is the ring of islands and north of us is the central island. Then we're going to have a jungle log and extend the wings outwards to the side like so, with trapdoors on each of those for the wing tips. And then I brought a couple of oxidized copper grates, because then we can scrape those back down to a slightly less oxidized state. I brought some honeycombs so we can keep those in place, and we're going to cap that off with an oxidized copper chain. And I'm not going to worry about waxing that, because of course there is no weather in the end, at least not right now, and so there's not going to be anything that will cause a lightning strike, for example. Coming back down to the level of the portal, we're going to invert that entire design, so we got the slab still with like a 2-block space in here, so that the player fully standing up can make their way into the portal, but we're going to have to fly in directly from the side, so chances are we're probably still going to be doing that with elytra, because once we've got these purple stairs in, there's not going to be a huge amount of room for us to get in. Oh, that's one risk of doing this, I suppose, is that you get teleported back to the central island. But yeah, like I said, we're going to have this housing of sorts around the outside, which means we're not really going to be able to walk up into the portal. Even like right here on this corner, I can't step up into the portal. We'd have to get into either flying mode or crouch or crawl if we wanted to get back into the space. But we could work on that if we wanted to open this back out again. We could extend this outwards in a different way. For now, I kind of like the aesthetics of it, and I've discovered that these exposed copper bars actually look quite good paired with purple, especially considering we're using jungle wood elsewhere in the palette. It kind of ties everything into a slightly warmer tone than purple is typically associated with. Once again, all of those have been waxed with honeycomb beforehand just to stop them from aging, so I can remove some of the other planks from around here, and I'm doing that very carefully because I don't want to accidentally drop myself into the void. But then below that, we'll do the same thing with the mangrove stairs, obviously inverted this time. And frankly, I kind of wish I'd brought a Happy Ghast through the portal already so I could deal with this flying around. And that would be a fun way to detail some more end builds, actually. Especially when I get distracted and I end up placing the stairs wrong. There we go. They connect to the mangrove stairs on the underside. That one's going to be exposed. That one's going to be weathered. We'll wax both of them and we'll add the chain to the bottom of this. But then around this one, just to make the bottom half look a little bit asymmetrical from the top half and feel like it's a little bit more supported, I'm going to add some pre-waxed exposed copper trapdoors here as well. And with all that done, we can step back and admire our handiwork. It kind of looks a little bit more, I don't know, totemic now. And between the trapdoors, there being stairs here, having some bars around the place, and of course the copper chain on top of there, I've made sure this entire thing is spawn-proof. So even though it's not well lit up, we're not going to be surprised by any Endermen spawning on or around this thing. Of course, if we want to ender pearl back to the central island, we can still do that. There we go. Just about managed to make it past the stair block there, although that's something you should maybe be aware of. And as we warp on through this, it shouldn't put us on the blocks of this in anywhere because there's nowhere for us to stand on a solid block. So once again, it warps us down to the platform below it. And once I've taken down the beacon, I think we'll come back and build more of a platform around the outside here so I feel a little bit more stable warping through this to the void beyond. But I think this is an area maybe we'll try doing some map art or something like that in future. This feels like a nice artistic way to dress up an end gateway that makes it a little different to your standard end gateway fare. And at this stage, if we really want this area to look special, we can remove all of the temporary leaf bridge and start to build up some other islands and things around here that feel a bit more welcoming when you arrive at this part of the end. But folks, that is where we're going to wrap up this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I do hope you've enjoyed another fun trick you can do with some bedrock manipulation of sorts. These end gateways are fun to play around with, and I recommend doing it before you fight the dragon a bunch of times in your world, just because it affords you some interesting opportunities for what you can do with the end void in future. For now, thank you so much for watching. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you folks soon. Take care. Bye for now.